We do not stand still and are developing for you, so we bring to your attention a new voice and a new story.
Upon Eleanor's demise, she left me considerable assets. In our recent gathering, my parents casually suggested utilizing everything for my brother's gambling debts, unaware that I had already moved the money into an untouchable trust fund. Their reactions were priceless when I shared this information. For those curious about your location, please share in the comments below. Give this post a thumbs up if you appreciate tales of resisting family manipulation. Trust me, you'll understand why setting boundaries with kin can be crucial after hearing what unfolded next. As I wrap up my tale, here's a message from my mother that arrived on a Tuesday afternoon as I wrapped up work at my financial advisory firm in downtown Chicago. Family meeting this weekend, significant issues to address. 3 p.m. Saturday at the house. No additional details, just Martha Brooks giving her usual directive. The familiar knot formed in my stomach once more. Important gatherings have always been a signal for needing assistance in our family. Growing up, my younger brother was the favored one, while I was expected to be self-reliant and clean up everyone's messes. Is this another crisis? Veronica, my friend since college and now business partner, questioned me from the doorway of my office. She understood my expressions better than anyone, so they say. I sighed and showed her the text message. Care to wager it's about Bradley again? No need, she replied with a dry chuckle. What's new this time? Another business failure? Third divorce? Tax issues? I massaged my temples, feeling a headache coming on. I don't know, but it seems serious enough for an official summons. 18 months had elapsed since the demise of my grandmother Eleanor, a person who was more like a rock to me, understanding me uniquely in our family. While my parents favored Bradley, it was my grandmother who nurtured me, imparting lessons on financial independence and self-respect. Her estate, comprising a historic property in Vermont, a diversified investment portfolio, and heirlooms spanning generations, was substantial. The inheritance process had been drawn out due to the complexity of her estate and peculiar conditions in her will. However, the final distributions were slated for next month, prompting an unexpected family gathering, which coincided with rumors about Bradley circulating through the word of mouth. Veronica mentioned cautiously, "I've been picking up whispers about Bradley." Cassandra from the investment company stated she saw him frequently at the Riverfront Casino last month, which piqued my interest. Could Bradley be gambling once more? Veronica affirmed this suspicion. He'd apparently visited nearly every night and wasn't participating in low-stakes games. A shiver ran down my spine. I recalled Bradley's past struggles with gambling during his 20s, depleting his trust fund until our parents intervened. It was believed he had gained control over it, but addiction rarely vanishes completely. Consequently, instead of organizing for my client meetings the following day, I ended up sifting through old family financial records. As a financial advisor and the only family member with some understanding of finances, I kept copies of significant family documents. Grandma Eleanor had insisted on it. What I uncovered in those financial files altered everything. By the time I entered that family gathering, I was already 10 steps ahead of their scheme to fleece me dry. Living in the Brooks household meant recognizing one's place quickly. Mine was as the diligent and sensible daughter, never stirring up strife. My younger brother Bradley was the charismatic son who seemed infallible. When I earned straight A's, my report card received a simple nod. However, when Bradley received CS instead of DS, there were festivities and rewards. "You don't need the accolades, Melissa," my mother would remark. "You excel in school naturally. Bradley strives." This principle applied to all aspects of our lives. I didn't require affirmation as I was self-reliant. Bradley needed continuous encouragement because he faced challenges. My saving grace was my grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother. A widow who had run her late husband's manufacturing business for 20 years after his passing, she saw qualities in me that my parents failed to notice. At one of our weekend visits when I was 12, she remarked, "You have a knack for numbers and talents unnoticed by others." Overlooking my abilities because of Bradley's needs was commonplace. Grandma Eleanor served as my guide. While my parents attended Bradley's sports games and movies, she exposed me to her investment advisor's office and showed me how to interpret financial statements. Upon turning 16, she aided in opening my initial investment account using money I earned tutoring peers. Financial independence is the essence of freedom, she often said, emphasizing that understanding money management would make one independent from others. Guiding by her teachings, I pursued finance at Northwestern University and later obtained an MBA and financial advisor certifications. In contrast, Bradley struggled in 3 different colleges before his parents ceased paying for tuition. Instead, they invested in multiple business ventures: a sports bar that shut down within 8 months, an app development company that never produced a profitable product, and a luxury car rental service that collapsed while racking up 6-figure debts. Each failure was followed by a family gathering. My parents would discuss how Bradley merely required another opportunity, emphasizing the importance of familial support. These meetings invariably culminated in my parents rearranging family finances or pledging their property for loans to help Bradley recover. When I expressed doubts about these choices, Richard, my father, would justify it by stating that Bradley harbored grand ambitions and had been unlucky. It wasn't bad luck, it was a blend of incompetence and entitlement. Bradley sought success without the need for effort or repercussions. The cycle persisted into our 30s. Established a flourishing financial consulting business. Married Nathan, a software developer who swiftly grasped my family's dynamics, leading to our eventual divorce due to conflicting careers. Throughout these events, I upheld my financial independence, as Granny Eleanor had always taught me. In contrast, Bradley fluctuated through jobs, relationships, and finances, discarding them like they were trivial. By age 34, he had 2 collapsed marriages, several credit card defaults, and was deemed a risky partner in Chicago business circles. When Granny Eleanor fell ill with cancer 3 years back, I was the one who accommodated her in my guest room and managed her care. My parents visited sparingly, and Bradley appeared only twice, both times requesting money while she lay dying. On one of her last clear-minded days, Granny Eleanor grasped my hand and imparted a piece of advice I would always remember. She softly murmured, "I've organized matters to safeguard you, Melissa," she said, her once robust voice now weakened. "The majority of my assets will be yours, not out of favoritism, but because you're the one who grasps its worth beyond mere monetary value." She requested that I vow to handle the inheritance wisely, to preserve the Vermont property where multiple generations of our family have spent summers, to carry on the charitable foundation she had set up, and to safeguard the family heirlooms for upcoming generations. "Your parents won't comprehend my choice," she forewarned. "They'll attempt to persuade you to share everything equally, disregarding the potential repercussions. Stand resolute." True to her prediction, the initial reading of the will unfolded just as she had stated. Upon her demise, it became clear to my parents that while they received certain bequests and Bradley obtained a modest trust for educational purposes or starting a legitimate business with approval, I was primarily designated as the inheritor. "It appears there's been some error," my mother told Calvin Spencer, Eleanor's attorney of 3 decades. "Eleanor wouldn't have intended to cause such family discord." "Mrs. Brooks, I can assure you Eleanor was very explicit about her desires," Calvin responded decisively. "She altered this will thrice in her last year to make sure it accurately reflected her intentions. In the past 18 months, there's been persistent pressure, indirect remarks during family dinners about grandma's wishes, and emails with links to articles on equal inheritance among siblings, probing questions about when the estate would be settled. I've kept my distance politely but firmly, upholding my promise to Grandma Eleanor. The Vermont property is being restored in accordance with historical preservation norms. The investment portfolio remains untouched, with the designated portions of earnings going to the foundation. Family heirlooms are being correctly cataloged and insured. Last week, Nathan called for one of our periodic catch-ups since the divorce. He inquired about the status of the inheritance, mentioning concerns about continued pressure from opportunists. "Are you still dealing with those vultures?" I responded facetiously, despite a chuckle. "They're still my kin." Nathan retorted, "Family doesn't aim to deprive you of what rightfully belongs to you." He suggested that my grandmother was aware of her actions, safeguarding her inheritance from their mismanagement. Following our conversation, I pondered on the accuracy of both Nathan and my grandmother's sentiments. Only a month ago, I unearthed evidence suggesting that my parents had inappropriately acquired information about the estate accounts. Inconsistencies in statements, probing questions revealing unauthorized knowledge. Something was amiss, especially with the upcoming family gathering. I needed to uncover the truth. A day after my mother's text, I arranged an immediate meeting with Calvin Spencer's office. Calvin, who had been my grandmother's lawyer for decades and was handling her estate, seemed the most likely to know about any hidden developments. His office, located in one of Chicago's old buildings adorned with polished wood and century-old leather furniture, welcomed me. Calvin, now in his 70s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, greeted me with a worried expression. "Melissa," he began after the secretary brought us coffee, "I was just about to contact you. There have been some peculiar inquiries concerning your grandmother's estate." "From my parents?" I inquired, already knowing the answer. He nodded affirmatively. "Your father has demanded copies of all account statements and property deeds, stating that you had asked him to review everything before final distribution." "Which I definitely did not," I asserted. "It was clear to me why the documents weren't provided, and that was because you hadn't asked for them. However, I've spotted some unusual account activity that I thought we should talk about." Calvin pulled out files showing someone had tried to access Grandma's investment accounts using a secondary password created during her illness. There were also inquiries concerning property appraisal values and selling procedures from the Vermont Property Management Company. "I'm confused," I admitted, feeling a knot in my stomach that hinted at understanding. "Why would someone consider selling the property? Grandma had clearly stated she wanted it to remain within the family." Calvin looked uneasy. "Apparently, your father had mentioned a family financial reorganization that would be more advantageous given the current situation, and he suggested this was being discussed with everyone involved." "This is news to me," I said, my tone tense. "What circumstances is he referring to?" Calvin hesitated before replying, stating that his boss mentioned pressing family matters demanding attention prior to inheritance distribution. I bluntly stated, "This concerns Bradley." Calvin didn't confirm or deny, instead maintaining professional discretion through his expression. I thanked him for his vigilance and asked him to continue ensuring security over the estate. Next, I visited Dennis Watkins, the family accountant who had managed both my parents' and Bradley's finances for years. Unlike Calvin, Dennis became less discreet when pressed about recent activities. "I'm stuck in the middle," he said nervously, tidying papers on his desk. "Your parents instructed me not to discuss this with you until after your family meeting," I asserted. "These are my grandmother's assets we're discussing." He sighed deeply. "You have a right to know. Something's going on." It was Bradley in trouble. Melissa. Serious trouble, amassing gambling debts. "You seem to know this already," surprising Dennis. "Were you aware?" I sensed your knowledge. "How extensive are his debts?" I deduced. "Around $300,000 owed to dangerous creditors." He whispered, "People who don't simply send collection notices, if you grasp the implication." The scale stunned me, and it seemed plausible that my parents sought to employ my inheritance for Bradley's debt repayment. Again, Dennis looked uncomfortable. "They have asked me to create financial projections using the most liquid estate assets for immediate clearing of his debts post-distribution." "Which specific assets are being targeted?" Reluctantly, he revealed their strategy. "Liquidate the investment portfolio, mortgage the Vermont property, and sell the most prized pieces from Grandma Eleanor's jewelry collection." In essence, they intended to dismantle everything Grandma Eleanor had expressly wished to preserve. "Did they do something like this before?" I questioned. "Use family assets to settle Bradley's debts without informing me?" Dennis seemed more uneasy. "Your parents remortgaged their home twice to cover Bradley's past gambling losses. Furthermore, 3 years ago, they sold a portion of your grandfather's coin collection that was supposed to be held in trust for both you and Bradley. That collection had been intended for us since childhood. I had never received my share and thought it was still in storage. Upon leaving Dennis's office, I immediately went to my parents' house as I still had a key during their winter trips to Florida when I would look after the place. Determined to uncover the truth, I realized my actions might not be entirely moral, but I proceeded nonetheless. In my father's office, I discovered folders marked Family Trust Restructuring, containing draft proposals for a new family trust designed to centralize all of Eleanor's possessions under my parents' management as trustees. Another folder contained emails between my father and a lawyer other than Calvin, discussing potential challenges to certain terms in Grandma's will if required. The most incriminating piece was an email exchange between my parents detailing their strategy. Melissa would initially resist, but once we explained Bradley's predicament, she'd understand. She usually does. My mother had written, "My father's response. If she doesn't, we can implement Plan B." The crucial point was gaining access to those assets before Bradley's creditors took drastic steps. With everything in the family trust, we could then distribute as needed. It was all there in black and white. They intended to employ emotional coercion to make me surrender my inheritance, failing which they were ready with an alternate strategy involving legal tactics to seize control. I snapped pictures of the crucial papers using my phone and ensured every item was put back in its original place. As I navigated home, I mentally inventoried the stakes at hand. The Vermont property that had been ours for 4 generations, Grandma's stock portfolio valued close to $2 million, painstakingly accumulated over decades, and the jewelry collection spanning pieces from the 1890s that were passed down through female ancestors in our family. This treasure would be sold off to settle Bradley's gambling debts if my parents succeeded. Once these assets vanished, they would vanish forever. The legacy Grandma Eleanor had entrusted to me would cease to exist. By the time I arrived at my condo, the pain and treachery were supplanted by a chilling resolve. They assumed I was still the compliant daughter who would put family harmony above all else. Little did they know, they were confronting a different individual now. The day after uncovering my parents' scheme, I reached out to Diana Roberts, a trust attorney whom I knew through professional connections. Diana had expertise in asset protection and was renowned for her innovative yet flawless legal tactics. Her office was streamlined and contemporary, markedly distinct from Calvin Spencer's conventional setup, symbolizing her progressive approach to financial safeguarding. Upon hearing my predicament, Diana said, "Let me verify I have all the details." After I outlined the situation, she responded, "So your mother bequeathed you these assets, and her estate is in its final probate phase. Your parents are attempting to manipulate you into transferring everything into a family trust they control, using it to settle your brother's gambling debts, correct?" I affirmed this. "And their backup plan appears to involve contesting the will if I don't comply," I added. Diana's countenance grew stern. "A properly executed will cannot be contested due to dislike of its distribution, but family members might cause delays and complications with false claims." I inquired about my options. The suggested solution was establishing an irrevocable trust prior to their actions. Assets within this trust, held by you as both grantor and beneficiary, become protected from such family pressure as your parents would have no legal right to access them. Diana estimated that the paperwork could be ready by the next day in the afternoon. However, swift action is necessary to transfer the assets before the family meeting on Saturday at 3, which provides a tight but achievable timeline of 3 days. She started taking detailed notes, noting we should reach out to Calvin Spencer promptly for coordination. Afterward, there was a flurry of actions taking place. Diana was drafting the trust documents, and I was coordinating with Calvin for asset transfers preparations. The task was intricate, necessitating separate strategies for each type of asset. For the investment portfolio, we arranged to set up new accounts in the trust's name and issue transfer instructions. Dealing with the Vermont property involved preparing and filing a fresh deed. As for the jewelry collection and other tangible assets, we needed to document their transfer to the ownership of the trust. In the evening on Thursday, I was at Diana's office finalizing the trust documents when my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer, Diana suggested, moving another document towards me for signing. I muted the call, but shortly after a text popped up. Why were you questioning Dennis about Bradley's finances? We agreed to discuss everything during the family meeting. Don't complicate it further. I showed this message to Diana. She stated resolutely, "They are aware of my actions. This only strengthens my resolve to conclude this matter tonight." Let's proceed with these signatures then. By Friday afternoon, the investments had been moved to the trust. Calvin had hastened the filing for the Vermont house deed, and the final action was collecting the jewelry collection from the safety deposit box at my parents' bank. This was the most perilous part of the plan. The box bore my name, but it was located at a bank our family has used for generations, where the staff knew my parents well. A hint about my presence might reveal my intentions. As the bank manager guided me to the vault, my heart raced. The safety deposit box contained not only jewelry, but also minor family heirlooms that Grandma Eleanor explicitly wished me to possess. Her mother's silver compact, the pocket watch that once belonged to her father, and a collection of antique family recipes dating back to the 1880s. Upon unfolding the box and spotting the familiar blue velvet jewelry cases, I was overcome by emotion. I delicately unveiled Grandma's emerald necklace, worn during special events, recalling the day she placed it around my neck at my college graduation. "One day, this will be yours," she had said, not just as a piece of jewelry, but as a symbol of the resilient women in our family who forged their own paths. I was now ensuring her wish would come true by completing the necessary paperwork to remove all items from the box, packing them in my bag, and exiting the bank without any issues. By Friday evening, I convened with both Calvin and Diana to confirm that all assets were securely stored within the irrevocable trust. The timing couldn't have been better. Everything was officially transferred less than 24 hours prior to the family meeting. "Your grandmother would be proud," Calvin remarked, a rare smile gracing his typically formal countenance. "She always said you had steel in your backbone when it mattered. What will happen tomorrow?" I inquired from them both. "They'll express shock followed by anger," Diana forecasted. "They may even threaten lawsuits, but they have no grounds. The agreement is foolproof." Calvin warned, "Just remember to keep your feelings under control regardless of their words. Once this becomes about family sentiments rather than legal privileges, they'll try to manipulate you." That night, I struggled with sleep, rehearsing my speech and strategies for countering their anticipated objections. By dawn, I felt composed but vigilant, similar to a chess player who had visualized several steps ahead. As I navigated towards my parents' suburban residence in the afternoon, I reflected on past family gatherings where I yielded to preserve harmony. All the instances when I prioritized Bradley's interests over mine, simply because it was customary. How distinct would this day turn out? I pulled into the driveway of the colonial-style house I'd known since childhood, finding Bradley's new Audi parked there already. It seemed his gambling debts hadn't swayed his car preferences. Gathering my papers and taking a deep breath, I approached the door, bracing for whatever awaited me inside. Before I could reach the bell, the heavy oak door of my past home swung open. My mother, in her powder blue cardigan and pearls, embodied suburban maternal perfection. "Melissa, at last. They're all waiting in the living room," she said, her tone echoing the forced joviality she used for her planned events. She hugged me briefly, the aroma of Chanel No. 5 triggering a torrent of memories, not all of them agreeable. The living room was staged like a theater setup. My father sat in his familiar leather armchair, scrutinizing papers as he read through some documents from his glasses-adorned nose. Bradley sat casually on the couch, a blend of worry and arrogance etched across his face as I walked in. He scarcely looked up. "A drink?" my father proposed, pointing towards the cocktail trolley where he'd already mixed his customary Saturday scotch. "Just water, if you don't mind," I responded, opting for the armchair at a distance from Bradley. I required a clear thoughts for what lay ahead. After some brief chit-chat about local news and weather by my mother, my father cleared his throat, signaling the commencement of the main discussion. "Melissa, we've called you here today to address a significant family issue," he started, adopting the commanding tone he was known for during my childhood. "Family has always been our top priority in this house," he emphasized. I nodded without interrupting him. We've confronted difficulties in the past, and we've managed them by standing together, he continued, looking at my mother, who gave a nod of agreement. Families stick together during tough situations, as they well know. Richard, just tell her, my mother said with pretended impatience. Melissa comprehends the essence of family loyalty. My father adjusted his glasses. Recently, your brother has faced some financial predicaments, he explained. Bradley squirmed on the couch but remained silent. The specifics aren't crucial, my father added. What truly matters is discovering a solution that benefits all. I spoke softly. I believe the specifics of these issues are indeed vital. My mother gave me a warning glance before interjecting. Bradley has been grappling with gambling problems once more, but he's receiving assistance now, right, Bradley? Bradley nodded without looking up. Yes, I'm attending meetings and such things. Immediately, we needed to tackle certain pressing financial responsibilities, my father emphasized. You mean his gambling debts? I asked bluntly. My father frowned at my forthrightness. Regarding your grandmother's estate distribution coming up next month, we've planned a strategy that serves the family best. I'm passing a file towards you. It's about setting up a new family trust to consolidate all of Eleanor's assets. Your mother and I will act as trustees, ensuring everything is handled appropriately for everyone's advantage. Initially, our focus will be on resolving Bradley's predicament. However, the property remains within the family. It aligns with your grandmother's wishes. You didn't react to the file. Calvin Spencer has shown reluctance in complying with our requests, which is unfortunate. But our lawyer guarantees this new setup is legally solid. We simply require your signature on these papers. He extended a pen towards me. The quiet grew as I remained motionless, refusing to take it. Eventually, Bradley looked up, his face clouding. Simply sign the documents, Melissa. Don't make this more complicated than necessary. Still, I remained silent. Perhaps you don't grasp the gravity of the predicament, my mother said, her tone sharpening. Bradley is indebted to some extremely perilous individuals. This isn't merely a monetary issue. How much? I inquired. My parents exchanged glances. $327,000, my father finally disclosed. An additional $80,000 to the IRS, my mother added hesitantly. And the loan from Uncle Frank, Bradley mumbled. Therefore, over $400,000 in total, I summed up, which you intend to repay using my inheritance. The family's assets, my father corrected sharply. Eleanor's estate is a part of the family's holdings. In fact, it isn't, I stated calmly. Grandma Eleanor was quite clear about her intentions. The Vermont property is to be preserved for future generations. The investment portfolio is set to finance her foundation. The family inheritances should be preserved rather than sold off. These were the sentiments expressed, not legal obligations, my mother emphasized. The will grants you legal ownership, she clarified, but Eleanor always intended these assets for the advantage of our whole family. I questioned, how does helping Bradley pay his gambling debts help the family in any way? Bradley angrily slapped the coffee table. Melissa, they're trying to keep me from getting hurt, or even worse. Isn't that what you want? To see your brother suffer because of your self-centeredness? That's enough, my father interjected sternly, though it wasn't clear if he was addressing me or Bradley. He took a deep breath and changed the subject. Melissa, we understand this isn't perfect, but it's temporary. Once Bradley recovers, the trust will continue to hold all assets for our collective future benefit. You've not been in need as often as you think over the years, my mother stated, though we all understood this wasn't accurate. Now it's your responsibility to aid your brother. I scrutinized each of their countenances, noting my father's unyielding assurance, my mother's scheming worry, Bradley's insistent arrogance. They seemed convinced about the course this situation would take, confident that I would yield, as I had in the past. There is information you might find pertinent regarding grandmother's inheritance, I eventually disclosed. Effective yesterday, I went on, maintaining eye contact with each of them. All assets from Grandma Eleanor's estate have been moved to an unalterable trust, making me both the donor and recipient. The Vermont property, the investment portfolio, and all family heirlooms are now safeguarded by law. None of you can access them. A profound silence ensued. My mother's mouth gaped without utterance. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. Bradley seemed puzzled as if I had switched to a foreign tongue. "It can't be true," my father eventually said. "The estate is still under probate, final probate," I clarified. At my request, Calvin hastened the last distributions, and Diana Roberts assisted me in setting up the trust right after. "Diana Roberts," my mother echoed. "You went to another lawyer without telling us, just like you went behind my back to challenge Grandma's will," I retorted. "Yes, I know about Plan B. My father's expression revealed everything. You had no authority to act that way." "I did have the authority," I asserted. "Those are my assets to safeguard, and that was exactly what Grandma Eleanor instructed me to do." Bradley stood up abruptly, his face twisted with anger. "You selfish wretch! Are you aware of the consequences if I don't pay?" "Bradley," my mother gasped, whether due to his choice of words or the confirmation of the danger. He persisted. "You've always been this way, thinking yourself superior, constantly criticizing me, the model daughter with the flawless career who never required assistance." I countered, "That's not accurate. I've earned everything I have. The disparity lies in my belief that I shouldn't rely on others when I make mistakes." My mother rose and moved to sit next to me, taking my hand. Her voice softened, coaxing, the tone she used to manipulate. "Melissa, dear, I understand you're upset about not discussing this sooner. That was our oversight, but can't you comprehend that Bradley's life is at risk? As a family, we need to shield one another." I delicately but assertively withdrew my hand from hers. "I concur that Bradley requires protection from himself and your enabling. This has to cease. You have no idea what you're talking about." My father intervened. "Bradley suffers from a disease. Addiction is an illness, not a decision." "I understand that," I responded, "and the proper response to illness isn't financial aid that encourages the behavior, but treatment. We can address this in court." My father switched to lawyer mode now, threatening. "You've disregarded the intent of your grandmother's will." "No, I've followed it literally," I clarified. "Feel free to contest the trust in court, but Diana tells me it's impenetrable. All you'll achieve is wasting more money on legal costs that could be invested in resolving the real issue." Bradley moved to the window, his posture tense with anxiety. "It's simple for you to say. You're not the one facing Vinny and his associates." "Who precisely did you obtain funds from, Bradley?" I asked. He turned, showing a combination of defiance and fear. "Does it make a difference?" "Money is money. It matters if they're loan sharks or even worse," I retorted. "That's not merely gambling. You're associating with shady figures." "Calm down," my mother countered. "Bradley resorted to obtaining loans from private lenders when banks refused assistance. It isn't perfect, but it isn't criminal conspiracy." Her evasive gaze hinted at deceit. "This isn't productive," my father commented, his strategic mind on the lookout for an alternative solution. "Melissa, the trust might be permanent, but as a beneficiary, you can manage distributions. You can assist your brother without dismantling the whole system." "That's correct," I admitted, "but I won't be doing that. If you choose to prioritize possessions and wealth over your own brother's welfare, then you are indeed making such a choice." My mother's voice stiffened. "I never thought you could be so heartless. I'm choosing to break free from a damaging cycle," I retorted, "one that you and Dad have perpetuated for years." "Don't you dare accuse us of this!" my father barked, his tone escalating. "We've made every effort to aid both our children prosper." "On the contrary, you've taken all possible measures to shield Bradley from repercussions, which is vastly different from helping him succeed." I rose, grabbing my bag. "I won't continue participating in this cycle anymore." "If you leave through that door," my mother said, her voice filled with what seemed either genuine feeling or dramatic flair, "you're abandoning our family." "I'm not," abandoning anyone, I retorted. I'm merely choosing not to sacrifice myself to keep others comfortable. We'll challenge the trust, my father shouted as I approached the door. We'll allege undue influence, incapacity on Eleanor's part, whatever we can. You'll be embroiled in court for years. I looked back. But how is that supposed to aid Bradley with his urgent financial predicament? Because private lenders usually don't wait for family court disputes to be resolved, don't they? This isn't finished, Bradley stated in a low, menacing tone. You believe you're so clever, but you're clueless about the situation. I took one last look at each of them, the individuals who were meant to be my support network, yet they had instead attempted to control and exploit me throughout my existence. I am fully aware of what I'm doing, I replied calmly. For the first time, I am adhering to Grandma Eleanor's wishes and setting my own boundaries simultaneously. As I moved towards my car, Bradley hurled obscenities from the doorway. My mother called out my name repeatedly, her voice transitioning from anger to supplication. My father was silent, which proved to be more disconcerting than their emotional eruptions. Once inside my vehicle, the composure I had maintained during the confrontation finally wavered. My hands trembled as they grasped the steering wheel, and tears obscured my vision. Expectedly logical, their reactions still struck me forcefully as I confronted my entire family's opposition. Driving to a solitary park spot, I wept for the family I longed for, my protective grandmother and my brother struggling with recovery. As I gathered myself, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Supposing it was Diana with news, I replied, Melissa, this is Thomas, your uncle, Thomas Brooks. My father's long-absent brother I hadn't seen in 15 years. How on earth did he get my number? I queried, bewildered. Me too, he responded, interrupting. Calvin Spencer contacted me. He believes I may possess information about your parents and Bradley that could shed light on the truth. We need to meet and discuss it. There's more to this circumstance than you realize. The following day, I encountered Uncle Thomas at a tranquil downtown cafe. He was barely recognizable. Our last encounter was at a family funeral during my college years. Now in his late 60s, he shared the same Brooks family traits as my father, but had deeper laugh lines and softer eyes. You resemble Eleanor, he said upon my seating. She would be proud of what you accomplished yesterday. You're already aware of that? He gave a wry smile. Richard contacted me in anger the previous night. It seems I am still his confidant when it comes to venting about family betrayals. Quite ironic, given our past. I vaguely recalled childhood gossip about Uncle Thomas being disowned from the family due to some business disagreement with my father. Did Calvin tell you that I possess information regarding your parents and Bradley? Thomas nodded solemnly. Your parents aren't merely attempting to save Bradley this time. They have other intentions. Over the following hour, Thomas disclosed a financial background of my parents I hadn't imagined before. Unbeknownst to me, they had been masking Bradley's gambling debts for over a decade, an extent and duration I had underestimated. From settling initial college debts, it had grown into hundreds of thousands by the time Bradley turned 30. Thomas clarified, the first significant crisis surfaced 8 years ago when Bradley owed nearly $200,000 to some influential individuals. To cover this, your parents remortgaged their house and liquidated a significant portion of their retirement savings. I confessed, I was completely unaware. They chose to conceal their predicament from everyone, including you, out of pride. Richard held resentment towards the seemingly effortless financial success you enjoyed, while Bradley faced hardships. A subsequent revelation was even more astounding. My parents were practically bankrupt. Due to Bradley's mounting debts, their own misguided investments, and a desire to uphold appearances, they had almost exhausted all their resources. Currently, our family home holds 2 mortgages, Thomas stated. Richard's law practice has been hemorrhaging funds for quite some time, with the majority of his clients transferring to fresher firms offering contemporary strategies. They've relied on credit cards and home equity loans while anticipating Eleanor's inheritance as a solution. Yet, why hadn't they confided in me? I would have provided assistance not for Bradley's gambling debts, but for their own financial predicament. Thomas sighed softly. Pride, control. Richard has always felt compelled to be the provider, the head of the household, despite his proficiency in finance. He couldn't concede failure. Then Thomas handed me a file filled with bank statements, property records, and loan documents. Documents he had collected throughout the years, observing their family struggle from afar. Why are you convening this gathering now? I inquired. Because I believe Bradley can still be rescued, but only if he fully abstains from enabling. His face grew stern. Additionally, since Eleanor requested me to monitor the situation should anything happen to her, she was aware they might attempt to utilize her estate for a final rescue operation. With this fresh knowledge, I coordinated another family assembly, this time on my terms, at my condo, with Calvin and Diana included. My parents arrived looking guarded. Bradley arrived individually, looking tired and defeated. Before we delve into the discussion, I stated once everyone was seated, I wanted to make something unequivocally clear. This meeting is not about bargaining for access to Grandma Eleanor's assets. The trust is already in place and will remain undisturbed. We are here to explore effective solutions to our current predicaments, rather than merely applying a short-term financial patch. My father began to protest, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. I've conversed with Uncle Thomas, I mentioned next. I am aware of the remortgaged house, the depleted pension funds, and the number of Bradley's deaths throughout the years. My parents shared worried glances. Thomas had no business disclosing family secrets, my father started. And you didn't have the right to try to claim my inheritance? I retorted. We've moved beyond privacy issues now. This is about survival, Bradley's actual safety, your financial stability, and the upholding of Grandma's legacy. I addressed my brother. Bradley, I require absolute honesty from you. What is the complete extent of your current debts, and who specifically are you in debt to? Bradley looked at our parents, who sighed in resignation. Only then did he drop his mask, revealing gambling debts amounting to nearly $450,000 spread across casinos, credit cards, and indeed, loan sharks with ties to the Chicago organized crime scene. They've given me until the end of this month, he confessed, his voice barely audible. Following this, they demand collateral, which can range from physically injuring me to compelling me to perform tasks to pay off the debt. Do you genuinely intend to address your gambling addiction? Bradley looked down at his hands. I've attended 2 Gamblers Anonymous meetings. It's more challenging than I anticipated, admitting that I lack control. I addressed my parents. What about your financial status? No further deceptions. They reluctantly confirmed the details Thomas had shared with me. They possessed less than $20,000 in savings, substantial mortgage debt, and balances on their credit cards that kept them awake at night. My father's law firm was struggling to meet its expenses. They had pinned their hopes on Eleanor's estate to resolve all issues simultaneously. This is what will occur, I stated after everyone had disclosed their information. I won't use Grandma's inheritance to fuel more harmful habits. Bradley will be entering a residential treatment facility to address his gambling addiction. This will be funded personally by me and kept entirely separate from the trust. Any continued support he receives will depend on his active participation and commitment to recovery. For my parents, I plan to help them develop a realistic financial recovery strategy. This could involve steps like downsizing their home, restructuring my father's practice, or pursuing legitimate debt consolidation. I'm willing to provide some financial assistance from my own resources, but again, none of it will come from the trust. As for Bradley's debts, we'll approach them strategically, working with credible creditors to establish payment plans and coordinating with the proper authorities to handle any threats from loan sharks. I've made it clear that I'll contribute toward resolving legitimate debts, but only after treatment has begun and only once those debts have been verified. This is conditional support, intended to encourage real change rather than enable harmful patterns. If anyone resumes past actions, assistance ceases on the spot. My father tried to assert his stance, but my mother interrupted, saying, "Richard, just stop." She sounded weary, yet more articulate than in years. Melissa was right, she added. We've been managing this incorrectly for too long. We've failed you, Bradley, she confessed, tears welling up. Not by withholding payment of debts, but by consistently paying them, by never making you face repercussions. This was the first genuine interaction I'd seen between them in a while. Over the subsequent 3 hours, we finalized details with Calvin and Diana's assistants. My parents agreed to financial counseling and openness. Bradley pledged to join a treatment program starting the following week. We set clear boundaries and expectations for everyone involved. Upon departing, Bradley hesitated, waiting until our parents exited. "I don't warrant your aid," he whispered. "This isn't about merit," I countered. "It's about family assisting one another in ways that foster recovery, not damage." He nodded. Perhaps for the first time in our adult years, understanding seemed to pass between us. A week later, I drove Bradley to the esteemed treatment center located outside the city. As we approached the entrance, he faced me. "I'm petrified," he confessed. "That's beneficial," I responded. "Fear signifies you're taking this seriously now. What if I falter again?" I pondered his words. "Then you'll need to summon the courage to try again. But this time, you'll do it aware that I'm bolstering your recovery, not your addiction. There's a distinction." As I observed him enter the facility, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not assurance, but potential. It was the start. Half a year passed, and I found myself on the expansive porch of the Vermont estate, observing autumn leaves float over the lawn. Grandma Eleanor always claimed fall was when the house reached its peak beauty, with red maple trees accentuating the white colonial building against the distant mountains. The renovation neared completion. Adhering to Grandma's desires, I collaborated with historical preservation specialists to preserve the property's authenticity while modernizing fundamental systems. This weekend marked my initial visit since the project's conclusion. My phone vibrated with a message from Veronica. "How does solitude suit you? Are you prepared for guests yet?" A smile graced me as I responded, "Perhaps next weekend." Still sorting through everything, the previous 6 months were filled with setting new limits and re-establishing relationships on a more wholesome basis. Bradley finished the 90-day residential program and now resides in a transitional recovery home, attending daily GA meetings. He acquired a job at a local garden center, a less grand position than his past entrepreneurial endeavors, but stable and devoid of stress. Significantly, he was managing his recovery one day at a time. My parents underwent changes as well, albeit reluctantly. They finally parted with the overly spacious family home and moved into a cozy condo. My father consolidated his ailing practice with a younger firm, now working reduced hours as an off-council attorney. Their finances were still stretched, but they were no longer overwhelmed by debt. Our relationships continued to be delicate. There were still contentious episodes and recurring behavioral patterns that threatened to reemerge. However, there was also a newfound honesty among us all. My parents ceased feigning perfection, and I stopped demanding them to transform into different individuals. During our last lunch, Veronica noted I had altered them. Firmness compelled their development when they had no other options. They transformed themselves, and I clarified her misunderstanding. I simply declined to be an option this time. Now, on the porch that has hosted 4 generations of family meetings, I pondered the true essence of this inheritance. Besides the physical possessions, property, investments, and heirlooms, Grandma Eleanor bestowed upon me something invaluable: the fortitude to set limits and the discernment to distinguish between aid and indulgence. An unforeseen car, clearly Nathan's blue Subaru, appeared on the lengthy driveway. Our friendship had grown stronger recently as the scars of our divorce mended, and he came by unexpectedly. "I hope my visit doesn't inconvenience you," he said upon exiting the vehicle. "While en route to Burlington for a conference, I recalled that you were residing there. Coincidentally," I said, "your face brought a smile to mine." Fresh coffee awaits. As we conversed on the porch, I found myself recounting the events of the past 6 months, something I had shared with only Veronica previously. "I'm proud of you," Nathan expressed after I finished speaking. "I always knew you possessed such resilience within. Even your grandmother recognized it. At times, I still harbor feelings of guilt," I confessed, feeling as if I should have acted sooner. "You did what you could when the time was right," he replied simply. "That's all anyone can do." In the afternoon, an unexpected call came from Bradley. Merely checking in, he stated, his tone calmer than it had been for years. Today marks 6 months of sobriety. That's fantastic, I replied sincerely. How are you feeling? Grateful, apprehensive at times, but mostly just present. He paused. I wanted to express my gratitude, not only for the treatment, but for not abandoning hope in me completely. You would have been right if you had done what was suggested. However, I countered, that's not how families behave. Instead, I declared, true family members hold each other accountable, yet don't desert each other. Following our conversation, I made my way to the library, Grandma Eleanor's preferred room in the residence. I left it untouched, as she had, filled with leather-bound books on the shelves and her reading chair by the window. From the desk drawer, I retrieved a small box containing the emerald necklace that she had promised me on my graduation day. Upon opening it, a letter previously unseen to me slipped out, penned in Grandma's recognizable handwriting. My dear Melissa, it began, if you're reading this, then you've assumed ownership of the Vermont house and discovered this letter where I knew you would eventually search. I want you to know that I bequeathed these possessions not only because you were the only one who would safeguard them, but because you were the only one who appreciated their worth beyond monetary value. The concept of family legacy isn't solely about possessions or precious gems. It's about lasting values such as courage, integrity, and self-respect that you possess in abundance. There might be instances when Richard, Martha, and Bradley attempt to claim what I've left for you. Stand resolute not due to selfishness, but because often the best gift one can offer others is to stop shielding them from the outcomes of their own decisions. Regardless of circumstances, remember that the most significant inheritance I could bestow upon you isn't locked away in bank safes or land records. It's the fortitude I observe within you, the resolve to make tough decisions and maintain integrity even when it hurts. With love, Grandma Eleanor. As I tenderly folded the letter, tears obscured my vision. She had always been aware of potential future events and equipped me not only with assets, but also with the wisdom to safeguard them. That night, I arranged a small dinner at home, inviting my parents, Bradley, Nathan, Veronica, and Uncle Thomas. For the first time since our confrontation half a year ago, we assembled. There were uncomfortable instances and underlying strains, yet there was humor and genuine dialogue, too. As we congregated around the dining table that had been the site of Brooks' family get-togethers for generations, I understood that this imperfect, complex, ever-changing bond was also a portion of my inheritance. Not just the material possessions and wealth Grandma Eleanor legally bequeathed me, but the family she had always envisioned us being. Some inheritances aren't confined to bank vaults or land titles. The most precious gifts my grandmother passed on were her courage and dignity, and those are things that no one could ever seize. What would you have done in my position? Would you have safeguarded your inheritance or bestowed it upon family, regardless of their intentions? Share your opinions in the comments section below. Should you appreciate this tale about asserting oneself while managing family ties? Kindly like and subscribe for additional true life encounters. Bear in mind that on occasions, the most precious inheritance isn't quantified in money, but rather in self-worth and bravery. Thank you for your attention, and may you discover the fortitude to establish limits in your personal connections when necessary.